Hello, my name is Luna, and on the morning of my 81st birthday, I watched the home I'd lived in for more than 5 decades go up in flames. It wasn't an accident. I knew that before the fire trucks even arrived. The way it started, the timing, the oddly sympathetic looks on my children's faces just hours later, it all fit together too neatly. Let me take you back to that day. I woke up at 6:05 a.m. just like I had every morning for as long as I can remember. Even in retirement, old routines are hard to shake. I brewed my usual black coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. The way my first husband, Charles, used to joke about. You drink coffee like it's a warning. He'd tease. He wasn't wrong. My little cedar home sat on the edge of Maplewood Bay, a sleepy town nestled between woods and water in Vermont. The air that morning was crisp, scented with pine and memory. From the window above my kitchen sink, I could see the lake glimmering between the trees. And the lilac bushes that Charles and I planted when we first bought the house had just started to bloom again. Those lilacs were the last living thing we planted together. My kids were scheduled to arrive that afternoon. Garrett, my son, and his wife, Sarah, and my daughter Abby with her husband, Jake, a real estate agent who always smelled like cologne and calculation. They were bringing the grandkids too. Supposedly. I set the dining table with my mother's porcelain, something we only brought out for holidays and guilt-induced family visits. I roasted a chicken, made cornbread from scratch, and even baked a peach pie. Though arthritis has made rolling dough harder than it used to be, they arrived around 4:30 p.m. Late. As always, Garrett looked heavier than the last time I saw him. Sarah looked flawless and bored. Abby wore her hospital scrubs, still had her name tag on, and Jake, well, Jake was already on his phone before he even hugged me. Happy birthday, Mom, Garrett said, handing me a bouquet of lilies. Lilies? I hate lilies. I've told them that every year for the past 10. We sat around the table, made shallow conversation. The peach pie got compliments. The chicken didn't. Then came the usual comments. Mom, are you still managing the house all by yourself? It's such a big place for one person. You know, a lot of folks your age are moving into Silver Grove. They say it's tranquil. Tranquil my ass. Silver Grove is a nursing home 30 miles away from everything I love. I'd seen the brochures. I'd heard the rehearsed tones in their voices. By 8:00, they were packing up to leave. Need help with the dishes? Abby asked. I'll be fine, I told her. You go on, it's getting late. The house was quiet after they left. Too quiet. I turned off the lights, locked the doors, and climbed the stairs. Sleep came quickly. But not for long. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the smell of smoke. Thick. Sharp. Wrong. The alarm never sounded. I checked it last month. Flames were licking at the door. I grabbed my purse more out of habit than panic and climbed out the window onto the porch roof. Just like I used to when I was a girl sneaking out to meet Charles. By the time I stood barefoot on the lawn in my nightgown, watching my home collapse in fire and ash, I knew. They hadn't just come for my birthday. They had come for the land. And they had come to erase me. But they didn't know me. Not really. And that mistake would cost them everything. And after the fire, I became someone else. In the eyes of my family, I was no longer the woman who raised them, sacrificed for them, or paid for their college tuitions with sleepless nights and calculator tape. I had become a burden, an aging inconvenience standing between them and a lucrative future. The morning after the fire, I was still in shock. sitting on a bench outside the emergency room, wrapped in a blanket the EMTs gave me. My hair smelled like smoke. My hands smelled like ash. And my home, well, it no longer existed, but I was alive. Too alive. Maybe. For their liking. Garrett arrived first. "Mom," he said, all heavy voice and fake concern. "You scared the hell out of us." He hugged me tightly. Too tightly. His palm lingered against my shoulder like he was holding a door shut. "I'm fine," I said, not really looking at him. Abby followed. Eyes glossy. Voice trembling. "We're just glad you made it out. You were lucky." No one used the word arson. No one even asked how the fire started. Strange. Isn't it by lunchtime? They were already talking logistics. "Mom, you can't stay in a motel. Not at your age. She needs somewhere quiet and safe." Abby added, "We've been looking into this place called Silver Grove," Garrett said, like it was some new vacation destination. Silver Grove. A senior wellness community. As the brochure said, translation, a clean, expensive cage with daily bingo and rotating nurses who call you Han. I didn't protest. Not yet. I just nodded. Let them think they were winning. By 6 p.m. that evening, I was driven to Silver Grove. Past the charred remains of my home, now cordoned off with yellow tape. My daughter handed me a suitcase. "Got you some essentials," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Everything brand new." Brand new. Yes. Also, not mine. There was nothing familiar in the bag. Not my old robe. Not the quilt I stitched in 72. Not even the rosary my mother gave me before she passed. They didn't pack my memories. They packed me up like a project to complete. Silver Grove was beautiful. I'll give them that. Manicured lawns. Scented lobbies. Soft piano music playing somewhere in the background. And every room had a view of something nice. A garden. A fountain. The illusion of peace. I met my caregiver. A bright-eyed young woman named Leela. She spoke to me like I was both precious and fragile, like a rescued teacup from an attic. "How are we doing today?" "Miss Fairchild," I almost laughed. "We're doing just fine," I said, smiling politely. But inside, I was already planning. What they didn't realize, what they had never cared to notice, was that I wasn't helpless. I never had been. Beneath the wrinkles and soft cardigans was a woman who had worked in finance for 42 years. A woman who had balanced ledgers, spotted fraud from a mile away, and who once taught herself real estate law out of spite, just to win a zoning dispute with a neighbor. I still had my mind. I still had my resources. And most importantly, I still had my secrets. Including one. They had clearly forgotten I didn't just own the house. I owned the land. Not in my name. Of course. It was held in a company Trust Clearstream Holdings set up by my late husband, Charles. A man who wore cheap suits but played the long game better than any Wall Street shark. Garrett and Abby had no idea. They thought with the house gone, I'd roll over, let them collect the insurance. Let them build condos on the lot. Let them forget me. But I wasn't gone. I was just repositioning. So I unpacked my suitcase, sat down on the stiff little twin bed by the window, and opened the leather-bound notebook I kept hidden in my handbag. I turned to a fresh page. In clean, sharp handwriting, I wrote Phase 1 observe. Phase 2, investigate. Phase 3, reclaim. Let the games begin. And if there's one thing I've learned in my 81 years, It's that betrayal has a scent. It's faint at first, like smoke before a fire. But once you smell it, you never forget it. And once it finds its way into your home, it lingers. Silver Grove gave me 3 meals a day, an electric recliner, and a bulletin board of watercolor classes and shuffleboard tournaments. What it didn't give me was peace. Peace doesn't come when your children have tried to erase you. So, I started making calls. The first was to Marshall Briggs, my lawyer of nearly 3 decades. Marshall wasn't flashy. He didn't own a boat or talk about golf. But when my husband Charles passed away, it was Marshall who quietly helped me transfer the land title into a holding company we built together, Clearstream Holdings. No one else knew. Not even my children. He answered on the first ring. Luna Fairchild. Haven't heard that voice in a while. You're about to hear it a lot. I said. I told him everything. The fire. The pressure to move into Silver Grove. The weird timing. The missing documents. He didn't sound surprised. He rarely did. I'll start digging, he said. See if your children have filed any insurance claims or permits on the land. Also, I added, find out how deep in debt they are. I want numbers. The second call I made was to Maggie Rourke, a retired fire marshal and my old neighbor from Maplewood Bay. Maggie and I used to trade tomato plants and gossip over our shared fence. She gasped when she heard my voice. Luna. Jesus. I heard about the fire. Are you all right? Physically. Yes. But something's off. The alarm didn't go off. And the fire started in 2 places. Doesn't that sound strange to you? Maggie's tone shifted. Very. I asked her to pull the report. Quietly. You still owe me for that rhubarb pie in '09. She joked. I'll bake you 2 if this helps, I said. And the third call. That one took a deep breath. I rang Nash Brenton, a semi-retired private investigator who once worked for Charles back in the day. Nash was the kind of guy who always wore sunglasses indoors and had a Rolodex of favors from every cop between Vermont and New Hampshire. He sounded groggy when he picked up some Fairchild, as in the Fairchild in the flesh. I said, and I need a little truth. What kind of truth? The kind that hides in bank statements, backdoor deals, and unspoken motives. He chuckled. Let me guess your kid's bullseye. Nash didn't need more. You'll hear from me in 3 days. While the outside world thought I was learning how to knit again and participating in morning yoga for seniors, I was tracking patterns people's routines. Which nurses gossiped? Which residents had loose lips? I knew that Garrett had applied for a development permit with the city. I knew Abby had withdrawn $12. $0 in cash the day before the fire. And I knew, thanks to Maggie's whispered voicemail, that the official report on my house listed not 1 but 2 points of origin for the flames. Plus, traces of accelerant. Accidental. My ass. Every night. I sat by the window with my notebook open and a decaf tea in hand. I wrote names, numbers, and timelines like I was solving a mystery novel because I was living one. Then, late on a Thursday evening, Nash called. They're drowning. Luna, he said. Garrett took out a second mortgage on his home. Abby's husband just defaulted on a small business loan. And get this. Jake met with a man named Richie Torch Mason a week before the fire. That guy's been on arson watch list since '98. My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. I'd suspected this. But now, I had it. Send it all to Marshall, I said. Quietly. I hung up, took a long sip of lukewarm tea, and wrote 4 words at the top of my next journal page. They thought I'd fade. But I wasn't fading. I was focusing. And I had just begun. And by the time they thought I was fading, I was already 10 steps ahead. You see, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need revenge. What I needed was leverage. It began with a chessboard and a quiet man named Walter Holt. Walter was one of the only residents at Silver Grove who didn't speak to me like I was about to fall apart. He was sharp, steady, and took his coffee black just like me. Every afternoon after lunch, we played chess in the courtyard under the oak tree. His hands were gnarled from years working on a dairy farm. His stories were few, but honest. One day, he mentioned his son, Eli, a veteran trying to open a local farm-to-table grocery store. But the rent's too damn high. Walter grumbled, moving his bishop without hesitation. Developers swallowed up every square inch of Maplewood. That made me pause. Maplewood. That was my land. My ashes. My battlefield. I leaned forward. Where exactly is your son looking? He waved his hand vaguely. Anywhere near the park. Downtown. Said it would be good for business foot traffic. Near the Saturday farmers market. I knew that area well. Because my house, well, the pile of it sat on a corner lot just 2 blocks from that park. That evening, I called Marshall. Me Lavier. I'm ready to move. I said. We're selling the lot. To your children, he asked cautiously. To a man who still believes in food, soil, and family. I explained the situation. The buyer. The location. The urgency. Draw up the papers. But keep it quiet. Marshall let out a breath that sounded almost like admiration. You know this will throw your kids into a tailspin. I'm counting on it. The next day, I asked Walter to bring Eli to visit. Eli was nothing like Jake or Garrett. He didn't wear expensive watches. He didn't rehearse his smiles. He wore old boots and shook my hand like he meant it. Mr. Holt, I said. I heard you're looking for a place to start a business. Yes. Ma'am, he replied. I've looked everywhere. But even the bad locations cost a fortune. What if I told you I had a corner lot in the best part of town? I slid a folded map across the table. It's clean. Cleared. And in need of something real. Eli stared at the map. I could tell the dots were connecting. This is where your house burned down. I nodded. I won't rebuild. I'm not interested in condos or cash grabs. But I am interested in legacy, community, and in giving people like you a fair shot. I named a price. Reasonable, far below what my kids would have sold it for. Eli blinked. That's incredibly generous. No, I said. It's deliberate. That evening, I received a call from Marshall. They filed it. He said, your son submitted a development permit for that same parcel. Says he's working on behalf of you. Do they have power of attorney? No. Then block everything. Already done. 3 days later, Garrett stormed into Silver Grove, like a bull let loose in a china shop. You sold it, he hissed. To some farmer, I set down my tea. To a veteran with a dream? Yes. That was our investment, our plan. No. Garrett. It was your scheme. He paced, his face blotchy with frustration. You don't get it. We needed that money. We're drowning here. And you thought I was the lifeboat? I asked. Calmly. He stopped cold. And for once, he had no words. You tried to erase me. I said softly. You gambled everything on me disappearing. I leaned forward, voice like a blade wrapped in silk. Well, sweetheart, I'm still here. And I didn't set out to destroy my children's lives. But I wasn't about to let them destroy mine. The morning after Garrett's outburst at Silver Grove, I received a visit from Abby. She brought flowers, daisies this time. Not lilies, and a box of sugar cookies from the downtown bakery she knew I liked. She was trying, but not for the right reasons. "Mom," she said, sitting across from me in the garden. I want us to talk." "Really talk?" I looked up from my notebook. "About what?" She hesitated. "The land. The insurance. Everything." I closed the notebook slowly. "Abby," I said, "you want a conversation. But what you really mean is you want control." "No," she said quickly. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I tilted my head. "Then why did you file paperwork declaring me mentally diminished 2 weeks ago?" She froze. I continued. "Why did you try to claim guardianship over my estate? Why did you and your brother go behind my back to submit a development plan on land that doesn't even legally belong to you?" Abby's face turned pale. "I didn't know all the details," she whispered. "Exactly," I said. "You didn't know. Because you didn't ask. You just assumed." I stood up. Slowly but steadily. 81 or not, I still knew how to command a room. I sold the land. It's gone. The deal is final. Eli Holt is building something real there, something for the town. Not a strip mall with your husband's name on it. Abby looked as if she might cry. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. "Tell your brother," I said firmly. "We're going to have a conversation. All of us. Tomorrow. 3 o'clock. In the conference room." The next day, the entire clan arrived at Silver Grove. Garrett, red-eyed and stiff. Sarah, his wife, with her signature fake smile and designer sunglasses. Abby and Jake, both unusually quiet. Even the grandchildren were dragged along, standing awkwardly behind their parents like stage props. I was already seated at the long oak table, a leather folder in front of me. The room smelled of mint tea and dusted wood polish. "Sit," I said. They did. "This isn't a fight," I began. "It's a reckoning." Garrett scoffed. "Mom!" "Come on, quiet." "Hey, did." I opened the folder. Inside were documents, copies of the fire report, bank statements, photos, signed confessions, and real estate filings. "You tried to burn me out of my home. You filed insurance claims before the embers were cold. You petitioned to control my estate. And you did it all, thinking I wouldn't know? Wouldn't fight? Wouldn't matter." I looked at each of them. No one spoke. "You were wrong." I slid another set of papers forward. "These are the new lease agreements. For the land under your homes." "What?" Sarah gasped. "You don't own that land?" I said, "You never did. It belongs to Clearstream Holdings. And I own Clearstream. Which means you've been paying me rent all these years. At a discount." I smiled. "Just slightly. That discount ends now. Market rates? Effective next month." Jake muttered a curse under his breath. Abby turned red. Garrett slammed his hand on the table. "This is extortion." "No," I replied calmly. "This is business. The same kind you tried to play behind my back. Except I play it better." Sarah looked like she might faint. "But we can't afford." "You should have thought of that," I said, before you lit the match. I stood up, closing the folder. "You have 30 days. Sign the leases. Or vacate." As I walked toward the door, I paused and looked back at them. "I'm not doing this to ruin you. I'm doing this so you never forget what it costs to betray someone who gave you everything." Then I left the room in silence. And not one of them followed. And I never thought I'd have to teach my own children what integrity means. But here we are. A week had passed since I handed them the new lease agreements. I'd expected anger. Maybe even threats. But what I got was silence. Not phone calls. No visits. Not even a lawyer's letter. Just silence. Well, silence and submission. One by one, they folded. First came Garrett. He showed up at Silver Grove with his shoulders hunched and a manila envelope in his hand. "I signed," he muttered, sliding it across the table in the common room. "Happy not particularly," I said, without looking up from my crossword. "But it's a start." He stood there, waiting for something approval forgiveness. He got neither. Then Abby followed. Hers was quieter. She sent the papers by courier, along with a typed apology on crisp white stationery. Not handwritten. No signature. No Sewell. But still, it counted. They both returned the insurance documents, 2 voided. Cancelled. Surrendered it. Apparently the company had already opened a fraud investigation. And no one wanted to be the one holding the match. They thought that was the end of it. But they were wrong. I wasn't done. Later that week, I met with Marshall Melavier at a small cafe near the edge of Maplewood. The kind of place where no one asked questions and the waitress called you sweetheart no matter how old you were. He handed me a folder. Inside were updated records. Garrett's development application denied. Abby's petition for guardianship withdrawn. The land deed for the burned lot, now officially transferred to Eli Holt. "You've outmaneuvered them at every turn," Marshall said, sipping his black coffee. "You could have taken them to court. Could have gone public." "I didn't want a VAR," I replied. "I wanted understanding." He raised an eyebrow. "And do you think you've got it?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know yet. That Friday, Eli invited me to the construction site. The slab foundation was poured. Wood framing was going up. Soon, Maplewood's first farm-to-table grocer would stand where my house once stood. Putik, isn't it? We walked the site slowly, my cane clicking gently on the concrete. "This wouldn't be here without you," Eli said. "I know." I smiled. "Don't let me regret it." He laughed. But he knew I wasn't joking. Legacy matters. What we leave behind matters. And this was better than a shrine. That Sunday, Garrett and Abby visited together. It wasn't a planned visit. No flowers. No fake smiles. Just 2 middle-aged children who finally looked a little older than me. They sat down on the bench beside me in the garden. I didn't speak first. Garrett did. "We were wrong," he said. "All of it. We panicked. We thought we were helping." "You weren't," I said. "You were helping yourselves." Abby stared at her hands. "It started when Jake lost his second job. Garrett was behind on the mortgage. We saw that lot. The insurance money. It felt like the answer. It felt like an opportunity." I corrected. "But not once did you ask what I wanted." "We're sorry," she said softly. Truly. I let the silence stretch between us like a bridge they had to walk. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I finally said. "It wasn't the fire. It wasn't the lies. It was realizing that the people I raised believed I was disposable." Garrett's voice cracked. "We don't think that." "Not anymore." I nodded. "Good." Then I pulled a small envelope from my coat pocket. "What's this?" Abby asked. "An amendment," I said. to the lease. If you follow the conditions we discussed, monthly visits, payment on time, no interference, you'll receive a 40% discount on the rent. Garrett blinked. You're serious? I'm old, I said. Not cruel. They both exhaled, the weight of their choices hanging heavy in the air. I stood up. Now go home, and try being the kind of people your children can be proud of. They nodded and walked away. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel at all. Peace. And I didn't just survive the fire, they did. A few months have passed since that long conversation in the garden. Since the lease amendments. Since the truth finally spilled like kerosene on a hardwood floor. I didn't expect things to go back to how they were. And they haven't. But something changed. They come now. Not just out of obligation. But maybe, just maybe, because they're beginning to remember I'm not just the old woman in the recliner. I'm the woman who built the roof they grew up under. And then, rebuilt it all over again. On my own terms. Eli's store opened 2 weeks ago. The grand opening drew half the town. Baskets of produce lined the sidewalk. String lights overhead. Free cider samples, and a live bluegrass trio from the local high school. There was a wooden plaque by the door that caught me by surprise. It read, "The Fairchild Market, in honor of second chances and strong women." I didn't cry, but my voice did hitch a little when I thanked him. It's more than just a store. It's a symbol. That burned land didn't become condos or a monument to someone else's greed. It became nourishment. For the town. For Ellie's family. For me, Silver Grove has started to feel familiar. The faces. The staff. The rhythm of it all. I teach a financial literacy class on Thursdays now. We call it Money Talks with Miss Luna. At first, only 3 residents showed up. Now, the room is full. They ask me how I learned all this. I just smile. You'd be amazed what a woman can pick up when she spends a lifetime being underestimated. Garrett brings me coffee every Sunday. No more lilies. Just fresh ground beans from a local roaster. Abby visits midweek. Usually with her youngest in tow. Her husband never comes. I don't ask why. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes we talk about the weather. The news. The pie crust recipe, she still can't quite get right. But beneath it all, something soft is rebuilding. Trust. Maybe not yet. But understanding. And that's more than I had before. Last night, I sat at my window, staring out at the courtyard where the roses are just starting to bloom again. I opened my notebook. The one I started on my first night here. So many pages. So many names. Plans. Moves. Risks. Choices. I flipped to the final page. And for the first time, I wrote just one word. Enough. Because it is. I've fought my battle. Drawn my lines. Left my mark. And now, I want something quieter. I want to grow herbs in pots by the window. I want to bake for the staff who never treated me like a ghost. I want to sit in the back corner of the Fairchild Market. Sip cider. And watch strangers build their futures on soil that once carried my pain. So new. I don't want revenge anymore. I want legacy. And not the kind etched in marble. The kind you leave behind in the lives you quietly changed. In the lessons your children teach their own children. And in the land that outlives us all. Because as Charles used to say, land remembers. And so do I. Always.